decided to improve my English, I quickly realized that grammar was the cornerstone of the language. It was like the framework holding everything together, the key to expressing thoughts clearly and confidently. But honestly, mastering grammar felt like climbing a mountain. I would stumble over tenses, mix up sentence structures, and sometimes feel overwhelmed by the rules and exceptions. However, I refused to let my struggles hold me back. Instead, I embraced the challenge and began exploring grammar not as a set of rigid rules, but as a fascinating system that made communication beautiful. Over time, I discovered strategies, resources, and practices that made the process not just manageable, but enjoyable. In this guide, I'll take you through my personal journey of mastering English grammar. Together, we'll explore how I tackled the basics, overcame the hurdles of complex rules, applied grammar in real-life situations, and maintained my progress over time. Each step of the way, I'll share the methods and mindset shifts that worked for me, hoping they can inspire and guide you too. Section 1. Embracing the basics of English grammar. My foundation. When I look back at the beginning of my journey to mastering English grammar, I realize that everything started with embracing the fundamentals. For me, this was not just about memorizing rules. It was about understanding the core elements of the language that form the foundation of effective communication. These elements became the building blocks upon which everything else rested. At first, I struggled with the idea that English grammar had so many rules and exceptions. The thought of tenses, verb conjugations, subject-verb agreements, prepositions, articles, and adjectives felt overwhelming. But I learned that mastering grammar wasn't about memorizing every possible rule at once. It was about breaking down these concepts into smaller, manageable pieces and understanding each one step by step. I began by focusing on the most essential elements of grammar. One of the first things I tackled was sentence structure. In simple terms, this is about understanding how words fit together to form a meaningful sentence. A basic English sentence follows the subject-verb-object order. For example, I, subject, eat, verb, and apple, object. This order became like a compass for me, guiding my thoughts and helping me communicate clearly. I spent countless hours analyzing simple sentences in books and articles. I would break them down piece by piece, identifying the subject, the verb, and the object. This helped me recognize patterns in sentence construction. It showed me how even complex sentences are just combinations of these basic building blocks. Next, I focused on verbs and tenses, which were particularly tricky for me in the beginning. Verbs are the engines of a sentence. They show action, state, or occurrence. But understanding the different tenses, past, present, and future, was a game changer for me. I had to learn how to use the simple present tense, present continuous tense, past simple tense, and future tenses correctly. Each of these tenses has a specific purpose, and mastering them allowed me to express time relationships accurately. I created tables and charts to visualize these tenses, with examples for each one. Writing down sentences like, I am eating, I ate, and I will eat helped me internalize these concepts. It became a daily ritual. I would wake up, read a sentence, identify its tense, and practice creating new sentences on my own. This routine strengthened my grasp on tenses step by step. Another fundamental element I paid close attention to was subject-verb agreement. At first, I would often make mistakes by not matching the subject with the correct verb form. For example, I once said, "He go to school every day," instead of, "He goes to school every day." This small error made a big difference in communication. I had to learn that verbs need to agree in number with the subject. If the subject is singular, the verb should match it with an S at the end, e.g., she walks. If the subject is plural, we don't use the S, e.g., they walk. Prepositions were another area where I faced challenges. Words like in, on, at, and between seemed minor, but were crucial for clarity. Prepositions show relationships in time and space, and getting them right made my English sound more natural and accurate. I began to observe how prepositions were used in sentences in books and media. For instance, the book is on the table and she is in the room. These sentences became examples I referred to when I made my own sentences. Articles, a and the, were also something I had to master. I initially found articles confusing, unsure when to use a, an, or the. The trick I discovered was to focus on the context. If I was talking about something general, I would use a or an, e.g., I saw a dog. If I was being specific, I would use they, e.g., I saw the dog that lives next door. This small but significant change helped me communicate more effectively. I also began paying attention to adjectives, which describe nouns, and adverbs, which modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. For example, in the sentence, she speaks beautifully, beautifully is an adverb modifying the verb speaks. Adjectives and adverbs added color and detail to my communication, making my language richer and more expressive. My early learning experience was all about repetition and practice. I immersed myself in simple exercises and quizzes, but I also learned that real progress came from practical application. I began writing short paragraphs, chatting with friends, and reading children's books in English. These activities helped me apply grammar rules in real-world situations rather than just in isolated exercises. I discovered that learning grammar was not just about theory. It was about practice, observation, and application. I would listen to podcasts, watch English movies with subtitles, and read news articles. Each of these activities became an opportunity to observe grammar in action. How did actors in movies form their sentences? What patterns did news articles follow? How did the grammar rules I learned come alive in everyday conversation? Mistakes were inevitable, but I learned to embrace them. Every grammatical error became a lesson. I would pause, analyze my mistake, and understand why I made it. This mindset helped me grow as I stopped fearing mistakes and began seeing them as stepping stones to mastery. I learned that making errors was not a setback, but a necessary part of my progress. In the end, embracing the basics of English grammar became a journey of discovery and persistence. I learned that grammar is not a barrier, but a tool, a powerful framework that enables us to communicate with clarity, confidence, and creativity. Each rule I learned, each sentence I constructed, and each mistake I made became a part of my journey. Understanding grammar gave me the confidence to speak, write, and listen in English with greater clarity. It allowed me to express my thoughts more precisely and connect with people on a deeper level. And more importantly, it taught me that learning English grammar isn't a task to be completed. It's a lifelong journey that continues with every word spoken and every sentence written. Section 2. Building Fluency with Advanced Grammar Concepts. My Breakthrough. Once I felt confident with the foundational grammar concepts, I knew it was time to step up my game. The basics had given me a solid platform, but I realized there was still so much more to explore. Tackling advanced grammar wasn't just about learning more rules. It was about understanding the nuances of the language and how those nuances could help me communicate with greater precision and sophistication. One of the first advanced concepts I encountered was the use of conditional sentences. Conditionals were fascinating because they allowed me to express possibilities, hypothetical situations, and even regrets. The difference between sentences like, if I study, I will pass, first conditional, and if I had studied, I would have passed, third conditional, fascinated me. These sentences were like windows into different scenarios, and learning to use them correctly added depth to my communication. I spent days practicing conditionals. I would write sentences, create dialogues, and even role-play conversations in my head. At first, I often mixed up the forms, especially when switching between the second and third conditionals. But repetition was my savior. Gradually, the patterns became second nature. I started recognizing these structures in books, movies, and conversations, which further reinforced my understanding. Another breakthrough came when I delved into modal verbs like can, could, should, would, might, and must. Modals are tricky because they change the tone and meaning of sentences subtly. For example, you must study is much stronger than you should study. Similarly, I can help is different from I might help. Learning to use modal verbs correctly allowed me to express obligation, possibility, ability, and permission with more precision. I found modal verbs particularly challenging because they don't follow the same rules as regular verbs. To overcome this, I created mind maps to categorize the different uses of each modal. For instance, can could express ability, I can swim, permission, you can leave early, or possibility, it can be difficult. Having these visual aids helped me internalize the rules and their applications. My journey through advanced grammar also led me to the intricacies of passive voice. At first, the passive voice seemed unnecessary. Why say, the cake was eaten by John, when I could simply say, John ate the cake? But I soon realized that the passive voice has its purpose. It's useful when the focus is on the action rather than the doer. For example, in scientific writing or formal contexts, the passive voice often takes center stage. The experiment was conducted sounds more objective than we conducted the experiment. I practiced transforming active sentences into passive ones and vice versa. This exercise helped me understand the subtle differences in emphasis and formality between the two structures. I began to appreciate how the passive voice could shift the focus of a sentence and make my writing more dynamic. Then came the challenge of relative clauses. These are clauses that start with words like who, whom, whose, which, or that, and provide additional information about a noun. For example, in the sentence, the book that I borrowed was fascinating, the relative clause, that I borrowed, tells us more about the book. Mastering relative clauses helped me create more complex sentences and add detail to my communication. I practiced combining sentences using relative clauses. The boy is my neighbor. He plays football became, the boy who plays football is my neighbor. This skill was especially useful in writing, as it made my sentences richer and more informative. Phrasal verbs were another challenge that tested my patience. These are phrases that combine a verb with a preposition or adverb, and their meanings often cannot be guessed from the individual words. For instance, look up can mean search for information, while look after means take care of. Phrasal verbs are everywhere in everyday English, so learning them was essential for fluency. I created flashcards for phrasal verbs and used them in sentences to practice their meanings. For example, I would write, I need to look up the meaning of this word, or, can you look after my dog while I'm away? Slowly, these phrases became part of my vocabulary, and I started recognizing them in conversations and media. Another advanced grammar concept I explored was reported speech, which involves reporting what someone else said. For instance, he said, I am happy, becomes, he said that he was happy. The tricky part about reported speech is the shift in verb tense, pronouns, and time expressions. I practiced reported speech by rewriting dialogues from books and movies. This exercise not only helped me understand the grammar, but also improved my ability to summarize and paraphrase. Over time, I became more comfortable using reported speech in both speaking and writing. One of the most rewarding aspects of learning advanced grammar was applying it in real-life situations. I started writing essays, emails, and even short stories in English. Each piece of writing became an opportunity to experiment with conditionals, modals, passive voice, relative clauses, phrasal verbs, and reported speech. Speaking also became an important part of my practice. I joined language exchange programs and online communities where I could converse with native speakers and other learners. These conversations were invaluable because they allowed me to apply grammar concepts in a natural, spontaneous way. Mistakes were still a part of my journey, but I learned to view them as stepping stones rather than obstacles. Whenever I made an error, I would reflect on it, understand why it happened, and correct it in my mind. This process of self-correction became a powerful tool for improvement. Looking back, mastering advanced grammar concepts was a turning point in my journey. It gave me the tools to express myself with greater clarity, confidence, and creativity. Each concept I learned became a piece of the puzzle, contributing to the bigger picture of fluency. Section 3. Expanding vocabulary to enhance expression. My lifelong passion. After immersing myself in the complexities of grammar, I realized that vocabulary was the next frontier I needed to conquer. Grammar structures the house, but vocabulary fills it with color, life, and meaning. My journey into building a rich vocabulary wasn't just about learning new words. It was about developing the ability to express myself with precision and flair in any situation. I began by acknowledging the vastness of the English language. With over 1 million words, it felt overwhelming at first. But I reminded myself that I didn't need to know every word. My focus was on learning words that I would use in daily life, words that would allow me to express my thoughts clearly and connect with others. One of the first steps I took was identifying common themes in my conversations, writing, and interests. I created categories such as travel, food, emotions, technology, and hobbies. For instance, I realized that I often talked about travel. So, I started learning words related to transportation, accommodations, and sightseeing. Instead of just knowing plane, I learned boarding pass, layover, and turbulence. This thematic approach helped me retain words because they were relevant to my life. Reading was my ultimate tool for vocabulary expansion. I began with books that matched my current proficiency level, like graded readers and simple novels. One of the first books I read was The Little Prince. Its poetic language and universal themes captivated me while introducing me to words like pilgrimage, vanity, and ephemeral. As I progressed, I ventured into more challenging books like To Kill a Mockingbird and Pride and Prejudice, which enriched my vocabulary further. I didn't just read passively, I engaged with the text. Whenever I encountered an unfamiliar word, I would underline it or jot it down in a notebook. But I didn't stop there. I would look up the definition, its usage in a sentence, synonyms, and even antonyms. Then I created my own sentences, using the word to solidify my understanding. For example, when I came across the word eloquent in a novel, I noted its meaning, fluent or persuasive in speaking or writing. I practiced by saying, "The speaker gave an eloquent speech that inspired everyone in the room." This process turned each new word into a friend rather than a stranger. Listening played a significant role in expanding my vocabulary. I started tuning into podcasts, audiobooks, and YouTube channels designed for English learners. One of my favorites was a podcast about storytelling, which exposed me to idiomatic expressions and advanced vocabulary in a natural context. For instance, phrases like over the moon or cut corners became part of my arsenal as I heard them repeatedly and understood their meanings through context. Music also became a surprising yet effective tool. Songs often use rich and expressive language, sometimes poetic, other times conversational. By listening to and analyzing lyrics, I learned phrases like rolling in the deep and walking on sunshine. These weren't just words. They carried emotion and imagery that made them unforgettable. One of the most transformative practices I adopted was using flashcards. I created both physical and digital flashcards to review new words daily. Apps like Anki allowed me to incorporate spaced repetition, a technique that ensures words are reviewed at increasing intervals until they're committed to long-term memory. On my flashcards, I included the word, its pronunciation, an example sentence, and even a small image to make it more memorable. Speaking was another area where I actively applied new vocabulary. I joined language exchange groups where I could practice English with native speakers and fellow learners. These conversations were the perfect opportunity to experiment with new words. If I learned the word meticulous, I would use it in a sentence like, "I admire your meticulous attention to detail." Hearing feedback and observing the reactions of my conversation partners helped me refine my usage. Writing became an equally powerful tool for solidifying my vocabulary. I started journaling in English, describing my daily experiences, thoughts, and dreams. For example, instead of writing, "I saw a beautiful sunset," I would push myself to say, "The sunset was a breathtaking tapestry of oranges and purples." Journaling not only reinforced my vocabulary, but also allowed me to experiment with sentence structures and expressions in a low-pressure environment. Another strategy that worked wonders was associating words with images, emotions, and stories. For instance, when I learned the word serendipity, I associated it with a personal experience, a time when I stumbled upon a hidden cafe while wandering through a new city. This association made the word more than just a definition. It became a memory, a feeling. Idiomatic expressions and collocations were among the most challenging aspects of vocabulary, but I embraced them as the spice of the language. Phrases like "a blessing in disguise" or burning the midnight oil added color and personality to my speech. I made it a point to learn not just individual words, but how they naturally pair with others. For example, make a decision or pay attention are phrases that native speakers use effortlessly. Another breakthrough came when I discovered the importance of prefixes, suffixes, and roots. Understanding that un means not or opposite of allowed me to decipher words like unhappy and unpredictable. Similarly, knowing that ology means the study of helped me recognize words like biology and psychology. This knowledge turned me into a word detective, able to guess the meanings of unfamiliar words. My vocabulary journey also involved immersing myself in cultural contexts. Watching movies, TV shows, and documentaries exposed me to slang, colloquialisms, and informal expressions. For instance, phrases like hang out or what's up might not be in textbooks, but they're indispensable for casual conversations. I made a conscious effort to note these expressions and use them in my interactions. Building a rich vocabulary wasn't just about accumulating words, it was about making them my own. Each new word I learned became a tool for expressing my thoughts, feelings, and ideas more vividly. As my vocabulary grew, so did my confidence in using English to navigate different situations, from casual chats to professional discussions. Section 4. Achieving Fluency and Confidence, the Art of Seamless Communication. As I stood at the intersection of grammar and vocabulary, I realized that my ultimate goal was fluency, being able to express myself effortlessly without overthinking every sentence. Fluency to me wasn't about speaking fast or knowing every word in the dictionary. It was about conveying my thoughts naturally and confidently. This realization set the stage for the most transformative part of my English learning journey, mastering the art of seamless communication. Fluency starts with confidence, and confidence is built through consistent practice. One of the first challenges I faced was my fear of making mistakes. Early in my journey, I hesitated to speak, worrying about mispronunciations or grammatical errors. But over time, I understood that mistakes are a natural part of learning. They're not a sign of failure, but a step toward growth. With this mindset, I started speaking English whenever I got the chance, even if it was just a simple hello or how are you to strangers. To create a fluency-friendly environment, I immersed myself in English as much as possible. I surrounded myself with the language, from listening to English radio stations to changing my phone settings to English. Every interaction, no matter how small, became an opportunity to practice. For instance, when shopping, I would rehearse sentences in my mind, such as, "Can you help me find this product?" Or, "Do you accept credit cards?" This active use of English in real-life situations helped me become more comfortable with the language. One of the most effective techniques I discovered was shadowing. Shadowing involves listening to native speakers and repeating their words, mimicking their tone, rhythm, and intonation. I started with short audio clips and podcasts, pausing after each sentence to repeat what I heard. At first, it felt challenging to keep up, but with practice, my pronunciation and rhythm improved. I noticed that my speech began to sound more natural, and my confidence grew as I adopted the flow of native speakers. Conversations were the true test of my fluency. To enhance my speaking skills, I joined language exchange programs where I connected with native English speakers and other learners. These exchanges were invaluable because they allowed me to practice speaking in a supportive environment. My partners were patient and encouraging, and I learned not only language but also cultural nuances. For example, I discovered the subtle difference between "I'm sorry" and "my apologies," which helped me navigate social situations with more finesse. In addition to real-time conversations, I practiced speaking alone. I recorded myself talking about various topics, from my daily routine to my thoughts on current events. Listening to these recordings was eye-opening. It allowed me to identify areas for improvement, such as mispronounced words or awkward pauses. Over time, I noticed significant progress, and this self-feedback loop became a cornerstone of my fluency practice. Another strategy that played a pivotal role in achieving fluency was thinking in English. At first, I caught myself translating sentences from my native language, which slowed me down. To break this habit, I started narrating my thoughts in English. For example, while cooking, I would think, "I need to chop these onions and sauté them until they're golden brown." This simple shift helped me internalize English as my primary language for thought, reducing the need for translation and increasing my fluency. Listening comprehension went hand in hand with speaking fluency. I exposed myself to various English accents by watching movies, TV shows, and interviews. This exposure not only improved my understanding of spoken English, but also familiarized me with slang, idioms, and colloquial expressions. Shows like Friends and The Office introduced me to phrases like "take a rain check" and "spill the beans," which I later used in my conversations to sound more natural. Pronunciation was another area where I focused my efforts. I realized that clear pronunciation is crucial for effective communication. To refine my skills, I used pronunciation apps and online resources that provided feedback on my accent and enunciation. I also practiced tongue twisters, such as "she sells seashells by the seashore," to improve my articulation and rhythm. These exercises were not only fun, but also effective in sharpening my pronunciation. Fluency is also about understanding the unspoken rules of conversation, such as turn-taking, politeness, and humor. Through interactions with native speakers, I learned how to respond appropriately in different contexts. For instance, when someone asked, "How's it going?" I understood that they didn't necessarily expect a detailed answer. A simple, "I'm good, how about you?" was sufficient. These cultural insights made my conversations more fluid and authentic. Reading aloud became a powerful tool for combining fluency with comprehension. I often read articles, books, and even scripts out loud, paying attention to the natural flow of sentences. This practice helped me improve my pacing and intonation, making my speech more engaging. I also experimented with storytelling, narrating short stories in my own words. This exercise not only boosted my fluency, but also enhanced my ability to think on my feet. Fluency isn't just about speaking, it's about listening, understanding, and responding effectively. Active listening became a skill I cultivated through conversations and media. I trained myself to focus on the speaker's words, tone, and body language, which allowed me to respond thoughtfully. This skill proved invaluable in both casual chats and professional settings. As I progressed, I challenged myself to participate in debates and discussions. These activities pushed me to articulate my opinions clearly and persuasively. At first, I stumbled over my words, but with practice, I became more confident in expressing my ideas. I realized that fluency isn't about perfection. It's about being able to convey your message effectively. even if you make minor mistakes. Fluency also involved embracing spontaneity. Instead of overthinking my sentences, I practiced speaking freely, trusting my instincts. This approach helped me overcome my fear of errors and allowed me to focus on the flow of conversation. I reminded myself that native speakers make mistakes too, and what matters most is communication, not perfection. By combining grammar, vocabulary, and speaking practice, I reached a point where English felt like second nature. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but a gradual journey filled with dedication and persistence. Every conversation, every mistake, and every victory brought me closer to my goal of fluency. Section 5. Reflecting on transformation and sustaining growth. As I look back on my journey, I am overwhelmed with gratitude for the progress I've made in mastering the English language. Learning English wasn't just about acquiring a new skill, it was a transformation that changed the way I see the world and how I interact with it. It opened doors to opportunities, broadened my horizons, and gave me a sense of accomplishment that I carry with me every day. Reflecting on this journey, I realized that the process of learning English wasn't merely about studying grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary. It was a journey of self-discovery. Every challenge I faced taught me resilience, and every milestone I achieved reinforced my belief in the power of persistence. The moments of struggle, like grappling with complex sentence structures or feeling misunderstood in conversations, were the very moments that made the successes so much sweeter. One of the most rewarding aspects of mastering English was the confidence it brought. I remember the first time I held a conversation entirely in English without pausing to search for words. It felt liberating, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. That moment marked a shift in how I saw myself, not as someone learning English, but as someone who could truly communicate in it. Mastering English also changed how I engaged with the world. From enjoying literature in its original form to understanding different accents and cultures through movies and podcasts, the language became a bridge to experiences I wouldn't have otherwise accessed. I felt empowered to explore topics and ideas beyond the limits of my native language, which enriched my understanding of the world. However, as fulfilling as the journey was, I knew that reaching fluency wasn't the end. Language is dynamic, constantly evolving, and staying fluent requires ongoing effort. To sustain my growth, I integrated English into my daily life in ways that felt natural and enjoyable. Whether it was reading news articles over breakfast, watching documentaries in the evening, or journaling my thoughts in English, I ensured that the language remained a part of my routine. I also embraced the idea of lifelong learning. I made it a habit to learn at least one new word or phrase every day. Apps and flashcards helped me track my progress, but the real joy came from discovering these words in context, whether in a book, a conversation, or a film. It was like finding a piece of a puzzle and seeing how it fit into the bigger picture of the language. Staying engaged with English-speaking communities was another way I sustained my fluency. Online forums, social media groups, and language exchange platforms became spaces where I could practice, learn, and connect with others. These interactions not only helped me stay sharp, but also reminded me that language is about connection, sharing ideas, experiences, and emotions with others. I also focused on improving my writing skills, which I found to be equally important as speaking and listening. Writing allowed me to organize my thoughts, refine my vocabulary, and develop a more nuanced understanding of the language. Whether it was composing emails, contributing to blogs, or crafting stories, writing became a creative outlet that deepened my relationship with English. Another valuable lesson I learned was the importance of celebrating progress. Language learning can be a long and sometimes daunting process, but acknowledging even the smallest achievements kept me motivated. Whether it was understanding a tricky idiom or receiving a compliment on my pronunciation, these moments reminded me of how far I'd come and encouraged me to keep going. Looking ahead, I see my journey with English as an ongoing adventure. There's always more to learn, whether it's mastering advanced grammar, exploring regional dialects, or diving into specialized topics. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I'm excited by the possibilities. The language has become a part of who I am, and I'm committed to nurturing it as I grow. If there's one piece of advice I'd offer to anyone embarking on this journey, it's this: be patient with yourself. Learning a language is not a race. It's a process of growth and discovery. Embrace the challenges, celebrate the victories, and remember that every step, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goal. English has transformed my life in ways I never imagined. It has given me a voice, broadened my perspective, and connected me to a world of possibilities. I hope that by sharing my story, I've inspired you to embark on or continue your own journey with confidence and determination. Thank you for joining me in this guide. If you found my story helpful or relatable, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your journey is just as important, and I'd be honored to be a part of it. Let's continue to learn and grow together, one step at a time. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey of mastering English. If you found this story inspiring or helpful, please don't forget to like this video and leave a comment sharing your thoughts or your own language learning experiences. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're passionate about improving your English and want more tips, stories, and guidance, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Together, we can make this journey even more exciting and rewarding.